You're listening to Body Banter, a podcast where we have conversations about the human body in all its forms and from as many perspectives we can find.
We are your hosts, Shagun Yedele
and Claudia Krebs.
And we are professors of anatomy in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada.
Anatomy is for everybody and every body, and we're here to get the body banter going.
We hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Body Banter. It's my pleasure to come to you again, and I am speaking today from Kelowna on the campus of UBC Okanagan in the traditional unceded and ancestral territories of the Syilx Okanagan Nations. As usual, I have my co-host, Claudia. Hi, Claudia.
Hi, Shagun. So good to be here again with you. And I'm joining you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam Nation, also known as the Vancouver Point Grey campus of UBC. I am so excited to have Sarina with us here on the podcast today. Sarina, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you. It's nice to be with you guys as well and have this conversation. I am Sarina. I live in the Lower Mainland. And I look forward to this conversation about long COVID and what life is like.
Thanks, Sarina. And you've already mentioned COVID. It's 2025, and we just acknowledged the 5-year anniversary of the beginning of the pandemic. And that 5-year anniversary, for me personally, it made me realize I haven't processed everything that happened in the last 5 years quite yet. And yet, we've all moved on. Nobody wants to talk about the pandemic anymore. Nobody wants to talk about COVID, except for those people who don't have that privilege, who are still dealing with the aftermath of the pandemic, with the aftermath of a COVID infection. Sarina, tell us about your journey.
Yes, thank you. It's interesting, right? Because it was, I think, traumatic for all of us going through COVID, whether we were affected itself by the illness or directly or indirectly. It's been quite the 5-year mark. It's been very interesting. I have some autoimmunes that preceded my COVID infection. I was infected in May of 2022, unfortunately, but also fortunately that it wasn't the initial virus as well. And so with that and with my specific autoimmune where I'm deemed immunocompromised and immunosuppressed already, COVID hit me quite hard. It hit me quite hard from the moment of infection, and whether that was impacting my lungs and becoming the lungs being so heavy and painful where it was going into my back, in terms of just the fatigue, the body aches, the fever, the cold sweats, everything just seemed to come on really quickly. I was always been instructed since the pandemic had started that if I was to unfortunately catch it, it would be very dangerous and to rush straight to the hospital. And I even had a few letters in hand from a couple of my specialists and my GP for the ER doctors to recognize how serious this quickly can manifest and get worse. And so here I go to the ER. In May, ER is packed, right? It's May 2022. We're in the pandemic. And the vaccines had just started to roll out in 2021. What was it, early spring 2021, March, April. And so we were still in this pandemic. So here I go with these letters, and I still had to wait my 14, 15 hours in the ER, just like everyone else. There was no skipping the line or anything like that. But I was given some medication. I was given the IV therapy, remdesivir. And remdesivir is given for 3 days. You don't stay in the hospital. So you go in every day for the IV treatment and therapy. And because of my comorbidities and because of my other medical conditions, it took a lot longer to infuse the remdesivir because I needed Benadryl prior to that, because anything that enters my body, I react to anaphylactically. So that would not have been a fun complication when already my lungs were compromised. And and so each day took a while, but it really impacted my muscles, and I just remember it was just like walking through quicksand or just moving through quicksand at all times. But I was very fortunate to receive that treatment, and it took a good, maybe about a week to slowly start feeling better after the 3 days of treatment.
So just to be clear, for me, Sarina, you were not at any time admitted to hospital. You were just given these daily shots or infusions as you went every day. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was a difference of opinion with various doctors in the ER and with my specialty team in terms of them, a couple of doctors wanting me to be admitted and me to be under care, because of my medical history. But then there's also the risk of me catching something else because of my immunocompromised system. And because I was already immunosuppressed, I was on a treatment that was suppressing my immune system, unfortunately. And so that's always the toss up in terms of, okay, do we really need to go to the hospital? Yes. And then at what stage do you prolong your stay there? And is it really feasible, or that's something, I can do with coming back and forth to keep me as safe as possible?
Thank you for clarifying that. That must have been a tough decision, right? Balancing your pre-existing autoimmune conditions with the acute infection. You described the acute infection, the heaviness of your lungs, how the heaviness extended into your back, the muscle aches, the fatigue. And for most people, once the infection was cleared, maybe a week or 10 days of recovery, they were okay again. I had COVID, I was sick, then I recovered. Now I'm fine. But you're not fine. So what happened after the infection cleared?
Yeah, and thank you. And thank you for acknowledging that. I ended up feeling a little bit better a week later in terms of, being able to move a little bit more without all this pain. My lungs were still very painful, very heavy. The sharp pain in my back had slowly been begun to subside, but it wasn't gone. And where I'm sitting for a period of time and the pain gets really bad. Um, Climbing the stairs was next to impossible. It was like I was climbing Mount Everest. Um, in terms of out of breath, the brain fog, the fatigue. So at that point, I was infected in May of 2022, and I continued to test positive for COVID and have the symptoms associated with a normal infection of COVID, not the intense, few days that I had, but anyone else who had normally caught COVID, and that's still very heavy and intense. I ended up testing for COVID and experienced those symptoms until mid to late September of 2022. It was in 2022 October. So I continued to present to the hospital with all these symptoms. My blood pressure had dropped drastically. I was anywhere between an 80 over 50, very dizzy, very, very not well. Couldn't think, constantly dizzy, constantly nauseous, and presented to the hospital a few times in the ER. And it was only in 2022 October that I was seen by internal medicine, and my respirologist decided to do a bronchoscopy because my lungs were still not clear. And they tried antibiotics for a few months prior to that, between May and October, and it just wasn't working. We'd switch antibiotics. And so it was decided to go ahead and do a bronchoscopy at that point in time. When, the bronchoscopy was done, I came home, and that was another big hit to the lungs because they go in your lungs to wash everything out like a pressure washer. They scrape out what they want to scrape out. And the next morning, I was woken up by about 9 a.m. with my respirologist giving me a call stating that the samples that went to BC CDC, they had found COVID deep in the lungs. And even though I was initially infected in May, treated in May for 3 days, in October I still was testing positive, and that's where they found the COVID was still deep in the lungs.
That sounds very, very harrowing, and I really, I mean, I'm struggling to just imagine that, Sarina, how for 5 to 6 months, something that it's almost like you were being still manifesting those symptoms of an acute infection, I wondered, and I would like you to describe, please, how that experience was like. Now you've told us a little bit about that, but since we're talking about the body, how did this affect your experience with your body? Like all the systems in your body. Can you kind of go into that in a little bit more detail?
Of course, and thank you for that. It affects. Let's start with the brain, right? It affects you mentally. It affects every part of your day. Whether, okay, am I going to cook today? What am I going to eat today? Do I have energy? And if you do have energy to cook, you don't have energy to eat. That's the words. Taking medication, setting all that up takes energy. In terms of the effect, and it takes a mental toll, and it's constant self talk going, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, down to, let's go a little lower now, the eyes. I had blurry vision already, and now I'm experiencing even more. Is it due to the fatigue? Is it due to just being tired that I just can't see? I gotta close my eyes a few times and then open them up to see things. Down to the lungs. The lungs it was really bad. It was painful. It was heavy. It was coughing things up. It was fatigue from constantly having to clear the lungs. And then there's also the other mental aspect of things is that I don't live alone. And so by coughing all this up and not being able to breathe, and you don't want to spread it to anyone else. So there's the mental fatigue and exercise, in gymnastics that way, in terms of where am I going to take care of myself, than to not put others at risk. And you're on your own. So you have the heavy lungs, you have the painful lungs, you have the full lungs, and they do feel full. They honestly feel like those gallons of milk that are just full, and you're carrying all this extra fluid around. And that's kind of how it feels. You have the muscle fatigue. So anytime you lift your arm, anytime you try to lift your legs, go up the stairs. I remember even turning around in bed and trying to reach for a water bottle. It is, again, mental gymnastics. Be like, okay, you can do this. Reach out your arm. Any small task is very fatiguing. And again, arms, legs, right? Chest muscles. And then you have the muscle aches on top of the muscle weakness. So, how are you dealing with the muscle cramping? How are you dealing with the aches? It's like I worked out with Serena Williams and she made me run around the whole court and I am beyond exhausted. Or I was hit by an NFL linebacker and your body is just aching. Every part of you is just aching. And so that is how it impacted my body. And to be having to go in and out of the ER and sit there for 14 hours and sometimes not have a chair because the ER is so full. And then being dizzy with the blood pressure that had dropped. And constantly nauseous as well because of the low blood pressure. COVID really impacted pretty much every system that I can think of. And this went on for months. The bronchoscopy was great in terms of we know where it is. It was cleaned out. I was given another round of antibiotics. I ended up experiencing chronic upper respiratory infections after my initial COVID infection. And I was on antibiotics for 2.5 years post my first COVID infection. And then unfortunately, I caught COVID from a family member who was just released from a hospital stay. And I again contracted COVID in September of 2023. And that COVID hit me really hard because that COVID impacted my eyes. It started with a double eye infection, which did not look very good at all. You have a double eye infection. And so again, we start the process again and back to remdesivir. And the second infection of COVID that I unfortunately got from a family member who was released from the hospital lasted almost 14 months. I was testing positive for 14 months at that point in time.
Sarina, that's incredible. And you're a young person, and to have your body impacted in such a significant way, and your control over your own body, your perception over your own body. You talked about the aches coupled with the fatigue, coupled with the difficulty breathing, coupled with infections in random systems with the second COVID infection, manifesting in your eyes. I think that's the first time I've personally heard about a manifestation in the eyes, but I'm honestly not surprised because this virus seems very opportunistic and goes wherever it can. So you've been through this really harrowing journey. You're now testing negative for COVID.
I am. We're celebrating that I'm finally negative.
Yay. Okay.
I went through a couple rounds of remdesivir in the second infection. So when I contracted COVID again in September 2023, went through the 3 days of remdesivir again, and it just, the COVID didn't seem to go away, and it was really heavier than the first time. And rather than doing yet another bronchoscopy, I was given COVID again in November. And sorry, my apologies, not COVID, thank God. I had COVID. I was given remdesivir again in November of 2023, another 3 days. Didn't seem to help. And then a few weeks afterwards, in mid-December of 2023, just before Christmas, I was given another 3 days of remdesivir, and that seemed to help. But I was testing positive from COVID from September 2023 for another 14 months.
Wow. And so you're finally testing negative. So I think it's safe to assume your body has cleared the virus with the help of the medical system and the antivirals.
Correct.
But your body is still dealing with the aftermath. So now that the acute infection, which was very long for you in both instances, has cleared, how's your body doing?
It's doing well. And again, because of my other, chronic illnesses plus the COVID, they both have impacted the same systems in my body. They've both impacted the lungs. And so it's been an interesting path since contracting COVID because I've had recurrent upper respiratory infections, and where I have been on antibiotics for about 2 years, 2.5 years, on just constant and consistent antibiotics. And so, I've had to go for a sinus surgery early last year in 2024 to see if we could rectify some issues where the body's just not holding on to infection, where it can hopefully filter it through. So because of all of these supports that hopefully can help the post-COVID kind of way my body interacts with any type of issue with the lungs and the sinuses, that has seemed to help as well. And so again, now I'm also finally off of antibiotics. So whether the COVID was the main perpetrator of these ongoing upper respiratory infections, no one really knows what came first, right? The chicken or the egg. And so you kind of have to treat both. Is it the long COVID, or is it the other comorbidities, and see what we can do to help, because COVID has left a very lasting impact on my system and on my body.
Yeah, it's just you've been on a journey, Sarina, and I'm happy that things are kind of moving up now, and you're recovering, and you're on the other side of it, hopefully. And I guess I'm wanting to ask you if you had a message for the general public. Maybe they don't understand this type of symptoms, and they may not have been sympathetic, and they may wonder, somebody may wonder, Oh, get over it already. And we have this also like in the context of an invisible disability that somebody is struggling with and nobody understands. So what would your message be to both the healthcare system and also to the general public about dealing with somebody like you, and being able to take care of you in a way that you really would like to be taken care of?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, because I think, as you bring up invisible illness does not mean it's imaginary, right? Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And even if there are doctors and medical professionals, even allied health medical professionals, and any really professional in the medical system that I've met, and I've met over 13, 14 specialists in this whole journey and this quest, or should I call it an adventure? Um, I think being believed, needing to be believed, and being heard and being seen and acknowledged is very important. Every one of us humans, no matter what challenge we may have in front of us, need to be acknowledged and seen and heard. And I think that is the message that I have for the public, as well as the professionals working within the medical system, is, one may look young, they may look active, they may look healthy, but if you look inside them, their cells are going crazy. It's not what necessarily is going on the outside. And it takes a mental toll when patients are not heard and when people are not supported within their own communities. Whether that means I can't walk from a far parking space to a grocery store and I have to park in accessible parking. And, being young, you get the looks, you get the comments, you get the no, stop, you have to park somewhere else from the community versus, a doctor going, oh, it's not that bad. I had COVID. It's not that bad. And it's like, okay, I have the comorbidities already that impact the same systems in my body, from the organs and the muscle aches and the weaknesses and the fatigue to, now having something else on top of it that's lasting so long and causing more of that. So, and I also think it's, people may carry the weight of their challenges well. They may be well articulated. They may not be the ones in the ER sobbing, crying, wailing, and that's okay if that's how you feel. But different people react and respond differently to various trauma, and I think we can't paint it with one brush. It's not how someone carries the weight; it's just understanding and recognizing that weight is heavy.
Yeah, this it sounds great. I'm going to pass it on to Claudia in a minute, but I just reminds me of another one of our guests on a different podcast who said that there's research to actually prove that physician empathy actually helps to improve the symptoms of pain in a different
Correct.
context. When people believe you, when they acknowledge you, when they demonstrate empathy to you, it actually helps to lighten the load. And you're actually reinforcing that message that when patients are believed and when patients are heard, it helps to makes them go a little further in their journey.
I agree.
I think we all agree, right? Like, I think empathy is sort of the foundation of the connection between all of us, and particularly between healthcare providers and their patients. Um, I think, actually, Serena, I want to ask you about this, your sort of take on it. I have a feeling that in our current healthcare system, we rely a lot on diagnostics, on lab results, on imaging, to validate whatever a patient is telling us. And we tend to downplay maybe the lived experience of the patient if it doesn't correlate with the imaging or the lab results. What's your experience been with that?
Yeah, and thank you for asking. And Claudia, and just to go back a little bit before I answer this question about, the eyes, and I forgot to answer your question there. What I've learned in this experience is that COVID, we've been asked not to touch our nose or mouth, or you wear a mask, but the COVID actually entered through my eyes. And that's how the second infection came in. That's why I had the eye infection. And in terms of people and patients being told, oh, your labs are normal. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. You're good. You know, these tests are normal. I think, what's really important is that, going back to the empathy in terms of the taking into consideration the patient's experience, their perspective, the backgrounds, where healthcare providers then are able to understand their patients, right, with more clarity. And then they can go ahead and help curate the best care for their patients. I believe, personally, I believe that given my experience and given how, we're told everything's normal or we're not believed or we're not heard, and we know our bodies, and yet we're trying to advocate, we're trying to explain things, and we may not have the vocabulary that is needed to explain what is going on within our bodies and what is happening with the various systems, whether it be the respiratory system, whether it be the musculoskeletal system. Even psychologically, we may not have the vocabulary or the terminology down. And then you add in brain fog, right, on top of all that. And so I believe that at this point in time now, in my experience, that I truly am the head of my medical team because, I kind of feel like I work as a quarterback, as I just did this morning, from one doctor to the next, and I'm calling both, and here I am being bounced around like a tennis ball, and I'm like, I don't want to be the ball. I just need some care. I need some medical care, and I think it's unfortunate. But I do believe we're in charge of our medical team, and at the top of our medical team, not in charge, I should say. Let me rephrase that. We are the head of our medical team because we are our best advocates, right? And so it is our responsibility as patients to also participate in our care, right? And when we have that clear and consistent and honest, empathetic communication, where I believe it can support the cooperation model of the two experts in the medical field, right? There is the medical service provider expert and there's a patient expert. And I think when we acknowledge that the patient is also an expert, just like Michael J. Fox has always laid out for us in his eloquent speeches, then we can activate that patient engagement model, right? Where it only can improve the shared decision making between the doctor and the patients, and where the patient is heard and supported and feels heard and supported, and their perspectives and experiences are acknowledged. And I think that's just so important if we end up working together and collaborate together. And that also means not just the patient and the medical service provider at hand, but if there's multiple medical service providers, then there's a collaboration. We don't want to be that tennis ball going back and forth. It's really exhausting.
That's such a great message for especially the students who I hope are listening to this podcast, to take away that the patient is always the expert in their body, and it's our role to collaborate with them in the provision of healthcare. I want to move on to now how you are, Sarina. I know we've asked that, but just in terms of your everyday activities, daily activities, are those catching up as well to your recovery?
Yes, it actually, luckily, I'm very blessed and very lucky. I've been slowly able to get back to my exercises. I just did 10, 15 minutes of that. And I was able to do maybe late last year, late 2024, I was maybe able to do about 2, 3 minutes on the bike, on the recumbent bike. And now I'm up to about 5 to 7 minutes, along with some stretches. My lungs are able to support it. My muscles still get fatigued, kind of like I'm hitting the wall, as in any person who knows that feeling. But I've been able to do that. I've been able to, walk a little bit, and the climbing the stairs isn't as taxing as it used to be. I'm not as out of breath, and I feel like my lungs are getting stronger, and I feel like my fatigue comes in and out. Yesterday was a quicksand day, as I call it, and that's when you just have to give yourself some grace because you know sometimes you try to control these things because you're just so frustrated after so long that it's just, why do I still have these days? But you got to give yourself grace in terms of you're not in control. And when you let go of that and relinquish that control, it's just sometimes so better than holding on to it where it's, really impacting you even more. And so yesterday was a grace day, and today was an energetic workout day. So
I love that you give yourself permission to give yourself grace and to let things go. I think that is such an important message, especially in this society where that is not valued or honored. So good for you. And I hope I can learn from you to
oh,
to do
well,
that.
thank you. I'm learning. I mean, I've learned over the years, and I think progress is never linear, right? It's always up and down. I always kind of joke about like, hey, if things are not up and down, we're flatline. We're not here. We're dead.
That's a good way
So
of putting it. It's so interesting. Like I love that you are able to chart your recovery with your bike time, right? From a couple of minutes now up to 7 minutes, maybe even longer, depending. You're able to do the stretches and your lungs, your body is able to support that. So are you making friends with your body again?
I am. I am. So as a former athlete, you know your body really well. Your body is your moneymaker. Your body is how you can make it onto the pitch or the court or the field or whatever sport you're playing. And so you get to know your body really well. So in a way, I also find myself I think of myself as very lucky and blessed that going through this unfortunate adventure with COVID and with the comorbidities that I have the experience of knowing my body well. So I know when something's off. And so I do feel better. I tend to try to give myself grace. I'm learning more and more in terms of what's going to work, what's not going to work. And if I go out for lunch one day with a friend, then I'm not going to do anything for the next few days. So it's also about pacing and realizing that and knowing your limits. I do happen to know my limits. Sometimes when I squint, I can see them, but then we pass them. Um, but no, it does take a toll as well, right? In terms of knowing what you can do and what you can't do. But I'm definitely getting there, and I'm feeling like I'm getting there.
Excellent. Very, very lovely to hear this, that your body is now at a point where you can, fall in love again with your body and do things that you really love to do. That's really wonderful to hear. And with that, it's a great segue to ask you this question that we ask all our guests. Sarina, what is your favorite body part?
I would definitely say the lungs. They keep you alive.
I'm not surprised
They
to hear
keep you
that.
alive.
I am a little bit surprised because your lungs
Are
have
you?
so much pain and caused so much grief.
Mm,
But I think
mm.
maybe it points to how you're making friends with your body again and acknowledging its strength and its resilience. And so I'm actually quite touched by you saying that the lungs are your favorite body part.
Yeah, I mean, they've gone through a few car washes with the bronchoscopies, and they've been cleaned out. As a child, I had asthma as well. So the lungs and I have had a very long relationship. And yeah, even with the pain, I definitely feel the lungs are my favorite.
Excellent. And Serena, do you have a least favorite body part?
I don't think I do, but I will answer the question. Just because of my comorbidities and how it has impacted a lot of my systems. I think my least favorite is my skin, but I'm also very thankful for my skin at the same time. So I would say it's a bittersweet relationship. If that answers that question, when the skin is affected, it is very uncomfortable and painful to live in that body being the largest organ. But yet, as humans, we're very lucky to have our skin as the largest organ protecting us, right? So I would say it's a very bittersweet relationship.
Oh, I feel you with the skin. I have eczema
Yes.
and so it's right there. It's visible for everyone. This week I had eczema under my eye and I was not happy about it, because can't hide it. It's right there. It's a manifestation um, for everyone to see.
Course, right?
Yeah.
It's that plus it's how it feels. It burns, it's itchy,
Yep.
it's not comfortable. And it really is anything with the skin I find is so distracting to go about your daily life because it could be stretching of your arm or just anything, right? Glasses or anything. So yes, I do feel you on that.
Yeah. Sarina, it has been an honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your very personal journey with us and with our audience. And thank you for reminding us that not everybody has the privilege of forgetting about COVID. Many of us are still dealing with the aftermath and dealing with invisible injuries, invisible disabilities that impact our daily lives and our ability to function, and that sometimes we need the parking spot close to the supermarket because even though we're not in a wheelchair, we can't walk that far, and that we need to really extend that understanding and respect to people instead of harassing them because they don't look sick. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Sarina, for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And if I can share one last thing with other long COVID patients, it is tough. It is really hard spiritually, physically, psychologically. And then on top of that, especially when you're not being believed. But I know how heavy and hard long COVID is and how much it does impact all of us. And if I can just share one thing is to keep remembering that we have gotten through 100% of our hard days and we'll continue to get through 100% of our hard days. So when a hard day comes, give yourself grace because you've already gotten through 100% of your other hard days.
Thank you, Sarina. I have goosebumps. That's such an important message, really talking about our resilience and our determination, and in particular, your resilience in face of a devastating aftermath of a small virus wreaking havoc in your body and in the bodies of many of our community members. Thank you so much again for being here with us. All right, everyone, that wraps up another episode of Body Banter.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to another episode of Body Banter.
We are Claudia,
And Shegun.
and we look forward to having you join us for more conversations about the human body next time.